I'm actually going to pull up. I'm going to pull up the text message if I can find it real quick. I had an epiphany yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah. I'll make it quick.
We love epiphanies.
Yeah, I do. I love epiphany. Dude, I should like name one of my kids Epiphany. I had an epiphany.
That needs to be the intro. I should name one of my kids Epiphany.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 6 of our podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Niall.
And I'm Austin.
And we're so sorry. And this week, we're a little bit more sorry than usual because, ironically enough, this episode, we're talking about capacity, and we'll go a little bit more in depth as to what we mean exactly by that.
But the irony is we only have about 25 minutes.
Yeah, the irony is that this is going to be a little bit
shorter episodes.
One of our shorter episodes, yeah. Because we've got some places to be and some things to do and things like that. So our capacity is a little short this week. But I'm so sorry. Still, I wish we could record a longer episode on this because it's a pretty interesting topic. But
it is.
Hopefully, we can still get some things.
It's a tough topic sometimes because, especially something like this, we like to go into depth in and maybe even get into it in like a future episode, like a way on, because capacity in itself is, you can't wrap that up in an hour or less.
Right. But essentially, Austin and I have talked about capacity before, but we just wanted to share the concept with all of our listeners. And before I go any farther, I just want to thank everyone again, as usual, for all of your continued support with this podcast. Thank you guys for listening and subscribing and leaving reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and any other streaming platform that you use to listen to this podcast. And if you haven't left a review yet or subscribed to our YouTube or followed us on social media, like on Instagram at We're So Sorry Podcast, feel free to do that, especially leave us reviews on streaming platforms because that helps our podcast show higher in the ranking when people try to search us, and that really helps us out. But with that, let's get into capacity. So capacity in the sense of the context within this podcast episode, when we say capacity, we mean that, for example, capacity, emotional capacity, I think is a good example. So,
I mean, that's kind of what we've been talking about more.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about all kinds of capacity, but emotional capacity specifically.
Yeah. So capacity as in, for example, let's say that someone has a short temper and when they lose their temper, the point where they reach the kind of peak where they kind of lose their temper, that's their capacity. Their capacity for putting up with things has been maxed out. And it's one of those things.
More of a capacity than others.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, some people have more of a capacity with others, and it applies to a lot of things. It applies to emotions. It can even apply to like intelligence, spirituality, self-awareness, things like that. But when you reach your capacity, it's expressed in expressions, really. So, for example, someone having a short temper, they are lashing out because they reach their capacity, and they show that with their loss of temper. And so it's not typically something that someone is aware of. Like, I have a capacity, you have a capacity. Everyone has capacities within every single aspect of their life.
And that's actually, I want to actually reference our last episode because we talked about self-actualization. In this, there is no self-actualization, quote unquote, with your capacity.
Right.
Because your capacity never, I mean, you're going to stop at some point. And it's kind of like with self-actualization. You're going to stop at some point. You've reached that limit. You've reached your capacity of self-actualization. Because somebody may reach a farther level than you do. Which
and
means
that's
that
their capacity.
Yes, they have a farther capacity for self-actualization than,
it's like,
you might.
It's like,
or than I might, or whoever.
Yeah. It's almost as similar to like filling up a cup with water. Yeah. Like, you can only fill up the cup so much. And when you get to that point where you can no longer contain, that emotion or continue within that state of mind, the way that you lash out is you telling yourself and others that you've reached your capacity in that sense, like we were saying with a loss of temper and things like that. And it's one of those things it's very difficult to be aware of that because that's what it is. Like, it's the reaction of you reaching your capacity, not you realizing that you've reached your capacity. It's difficult in the moment because it's such a reactive thing. And that's something we've talked about before, not on this podcast yet, but is reactivity and being a reactive person instead of a proactive person and being aware and conscious of the decisions that you make and the way that you're reacting to your
Essentially,
stimulus and
yeah,
circumstances.
essentially, it's just like if you're a reactive person, something happens, you do something about it
Mhm.
in an instant, whether
Exactly.
it's good or bad. You haven't
Right.
thought about it.
Right.
There's basically no. It's like a chemical reaction. Like
Yes.
you mix two chemicals together, boom, it just
Yes.
fires off.
Mhm.
However, if you've got like you said, what was it, proactive? Yeah, a
Mhm.
proactive reaction. That's when something's happened. Let me sit down, think about this, and figure out the best or
Exactly.
worst way to go
Mhm.
about it. But
Yeah.
typically, the best way to go about it and
Right.
fix things or whatever the case may be.
It's
Whatever the scenario is.
Yeah, it's typically not doing the first thing that comes to mind.
Exactly.
Like not being instinctive. Yeah,
Instinctive.
Not being instinctive and reactive, like we've been saying.
Yeah, it's like I think it was Peter in the Bible. He was known for speaking first and thinking later, which would be reactive.
Mm-hmm.
Which most, if not all, people are
Yeah.
at least to start out with until you kind of start working on
Yeah.
it. And when you should be thinking first and speaking later,
Right. Yeah.
which I mean, it's a difficult thing to do on its own, but still,
Yeah. But yeah, I think capacity and reactivity are very closely linked because you are reactive when you reach your capacity. And it's almost like I'm trying to think of a way to phrase it that's a little bit more simplistic for people to understand. It's like hitting your breaking point, like you just can't handle it anymore.
And
but
it's like you were talking about with the cup earlier, you start filling it with water, eventually it's going to reach a limit and start pouring over.
Yeah. And so, like, for example,
if it can pour over, I mean,
yeah,
might have a lid on it. Who knows?
Right. It might just explode or implode upon itself. And
honestly, I'm so happy that you just said that because we reach our capacity with things so often that sometimes we get overfilled, or like you just said, we explode.
Yeah.
We explode with emotion. So if we're talking about capacity in emotions specifically, you get stressed, you get overloaded, you get
tired.
Tired. You get so many things piling on at once that you just have this big explosion overall. Like if you start, I know I for one bring a lot of things in and keep them in for a while, and then eventually all it takes is one thing to push it just over the top, and then I'm just done for who knows how long until I get it all out of my system, and then I'm okay again.
Yep.
But I mean, it's like we're talking about with the cup, it fills over. You can even use a sponge. A sponge can only soak up so much water before it needs to wring out. But those are just a couple of examples.
That's a perfect example. But capacity also applies to other things. So, for example, like I'm going to use this example. My capacity for drag racing is much less than your capacity for drag racing. And my capacity
we did talk about drag racing on here before, right?
Yes, we have. Yeah.
Okay.
Austin's
First episode.
When we introduced ourselves. But yeah, in case anyone didn't know or just happened to forget, Austin does a lot of drag racing and all that kind of stuff. Very
now,
cool.
That's not like a drag queen. That's like an race car. So,
yeah. But yeah, so my capacity of understanding and the way that I process drag racing is much lower than yours because you've kind of exercised that capacity.
I have experience.
Yeah, you have experience. And
my capacity is lower in like DJing and like recording and what is it?
Production?
Yes, production. Thank you for saying that because I could not think of the word.
It's because my capacity is a little bit higher.
Your capacity.
I'm so sorry.
Here's the really funny thing. So, for one, I do have a lower capacity in producing because you've had experience and stuff like that. Now, if I had just as much experience, we'd be kind of even.
Yeah.
But here's what's really funny. He just said that he has more capacity than me on, just about every level, actually. I'll admit to that one. But the thing is, one, I'm working to get more, you can push your own capacity.
Yes.
It's like going to the gym. Like, you have a certain capacity when you start going to the gym. The idea is that you do more to extend your capacity slowly. You don't want to do it all at once, but you do it slowly. Now, the funny thing is, and this is what I was going to say earlier, this is why it's so great to have like a close best friend that you can just bounce ideas off of, because ever since I started hanging out with you more often, my capacity has expanded significantly. I've noticed that we started hanging out more frequently in September? So whenever we started hanging out all the time, I started talking to him and like having these new ideas and realizing that I wasn't insane for having the old ideas that I was, as well as being able to expand my knowledge. Because he would, and you'll hear him use, some people like to call them bigger words.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I mean, significantly is
Yeah,
a
just
bigger word.
just like our vocabulary expanded and the way that we like
That's
to
what I was
express
saying,
and
yeah.
understand our
Exactly, and
existence.
he
Yeah.
has like helped me expand my vocabulary because you used a lot of words. I think I even had to ask you sometimes, what does that mean? Because I didn't know what it was. But now there were some of them I knew what it meant. I just never used them. But the more that you used them, the more I started using them, and the bigger my capacity.
You
grew.
use some words that I didn't know. I forgot. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
So I can't think of any off the top of my
but
head.
there were
either.
definitely some words that you were using for a while that I was like, I'm gonna use that occasionally.
Yeah, and that's how it is. It's like, I mean, that's just with words.
Yeah.
But like, we can even talk about emotional capacity.
Yeah.
Because of the stuff that me and you have both gone through. We've talked about these things. We've gone through these things.
Yep.
We've discovered these new things about ourselves, and we have been able to kind of expand our own emotional capacity as well by being able to talk to each other.
Right.
That's one thing that really does help a lot with specifically emotional capacity is other people.
Yeah.
It's difficult to expand that on your own. You can, but it's very difficult to.
Right. Because it takes active practice. Like it's not like reading a book or watching a YouTube video.
No,
I mean,
it's something you actually have to actively practice doing because I noticed he went back up to Illinois a couple of months ago. What was it, 2 months ago, something like that?
yeah, it was in November.
Yeah, it was like 2 months ago. While he was gone, I noticed my actual capacity was like going down. It was like,
wow.
Yeah, it was weird. It's like I think I even told you about this. My capacity had like reached a certain limit, and since I wasn't using it, it wasn't going back up to that limit. It was starting to lower its limit, and it was so strange because I would be talking to somebody, and I would think of something that would normally just come right off the top of my brain, and I would know what it was because of you, and I would just blank, and I would forget what I was talking about, and it was so difficult and so weird because it's not like it just left my brain. I just forgot the actual term or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But then you came back and we started talking more, and my capacity has since started going back up. But it's such a weird thing that if you don't actively practice it, it's going to go down. And it's like the same thing with the gym, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example.
Yeah, if you don't actively go to the gym, your muscles are going to go away, basically.
Yeah.
They're going to slowly shrink down.
And I think, so 2 things I'm going to say. I think I thought of a way to kind of phrase capacity.
Thank you.
Capacity is your ability or inability to take in stimuli from your life, no matter what that is, whether it's emotional, intellectual, whatever. It is your ability or inability to take in that stimuli and control your reaction and control how much you can handle before you get reactive, like to instinctually reactive. Like if you are more proactively reactive, the longer you can stay proactively reactive and think about what you're doing based off what happens to you, the more capacity you have. So the more able you are to handle stress, anxiety, pressure, anything, any stimuli that is going to put weight on you, it is your capacity is essentially your ability or lack thereof to handle that so far until you start becoming unaware that you're being negatively reactive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
I would say like a kind of quick and easy way to define capacity is your limit or the most you can stand without exploding.
Yeah. And I just think that because like we're always going to be reactive though. Like that's the point.
Well, yeah,
saying. Like
that's almost the point of life. I mean, you're going to be reactive to things.
It's just
it's not like
the
you can
point
just
I'm trying to
completely
make
stop it.
is that it's the distinction between actively reactive or subconsciously reactive, where you're not aware of the reactions that you're making.
Yeah.
When you're aware of the reactions, then that means you have a higher capacity because instead of just taking that initial chemical reaction, you're taking the time to think about what you're doing and what you're feeling and stuff like that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, that's
it's essentially you're not jumping to conclusions right away. You're being thorough with your thoughts and your actions and emotions and such. But the other thing I was going to say is
that's
that
the whole point of this podcast is actually thinking things through.
Yeah. But anyway, it is possible, like we were saying, it is possible to grow your capacity. But I think the most difficult step in growing your capacity is realizing that you need to grow your capacity. This does
like
relate to self-actualization.
Solving a problem is realizing that there is one.
Like what we talked about last week with self-actualization. It's just very difficult because when you're in that reactive state, it takes a lapse in that reactiveness to then think, wait a second, I'm being reactive.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to do because you have to you have to essentially, and especially if it's anger, you have to calm down in a second.
Yeah.
I mean, a split second, you have to calm down in a second and think, oh my gosh, what do I need to do? How do I need to go about this? And then react. And it's difficult.
It's very difficult, yeah. Well, because, yesterday I went to the doctor and it turns out, calling back to a couple episodes ago, I don't remember exactly which episode we talked about this in, but it turns out that I do in fact have a hernia. So now I'm going to have surgery. And I was trying not to be reactive. I did get a little upset, but I was talking to someone and they really got me to calm down. Like they really just put me in the right mindset. And it was interesting because I'm actually going to pull up the text message if I can find it real quick. I had an epiphany yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah. I'll make it quick.
We love epiphanies.
Yeah, I do. I love epiphany. Dude, I should like name one of my kids Epiphany. I had an epiphany.
That needs to be the intro. I should name one of my kids Epiphany. And then just instant laughter.
I should name one of my kids Epiphany, and then that'd be hilarious. Okay.
Instant laughter.
So this is what I said. I said, whenever I feel like I don't have control, I feel like a feather floating in the wind or a leaf floating down a river. I have no control of where the wind will take me and where I'll end up. It makes me feel so weak and inferior. I feel like I should have control over my life and my outcome because it is my life after all. But now I'm wondering if the thing I'm fighting is the same thing that people spend their whole lives trying to find. Maybe people spend their whole lives trying to get to a point where they feel like a feather in the wind or a leaf floating down the river. Maybe if I stopped fighting it and let things go. I don't know. I'm always so hung up on trying to have control, and maybe I just need to change my mindset. Maybe I found a blessing, but I'm treating it like a curse. And
that was so like, I don't want to say wisdom filled, but it was like a verse. I don't know.
Interesting.
Or not. I mean, kind of like a I don't know. It's a very what?
You almost had it, didn't you?
I did.
Oh.
This is my capacity.
But anyway, so if you happen to remember, feel free to cut me off.
I will. But it was nice.
Thank you. But what I realized by saying that is that, like the situation I was in, and instead of, I was feeling pretty down and I was being reactive.
Profound.
Oh, profound.
It wasn't exactly profound that I was looking for, but it was along those lines.
But when I was saying that, I was realizing that maybe the same thing that I'm trying to go against is the same. Like I'm going against the grain. I'm trying to go against the wind when I should actually be letting, life take me, like kind of going with the flow. Because when you go against the flow, you're gonna be finding some opposition there, and
there's gonna be some resistance.
Yeah, and so I feel as though I kind of increased my capacity by realizing that, I don't always need to make my life exactly what I want it to be in my mind, because sometimes life has better things in mind for you instead. And anyway, I think, the example that I'm using for my actual capacity there is how quickly I realized that I wasn't thinking right. Like how quickly did I realize that I was thinking too negatively? How quickly did I realize that I was being too pessimistic?
Because you will. You'll notice it eventually. The positive will come in.
Yeah, but it's about getting it
time. Though. Yeah. And the quicker you can jump to that positive conclusion, the better off you'll be.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
It's like, how quickly can you realize that you need to change your thought process?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not always about being pessimistic or optimistic. Sometimes it's just about making the right decision. It doesn't always have to be a positive or negative thing. It's just, you don't always want to, essentially just don't always do the first thing that comes to mind, because that's not always the greatest thing.
Not always the best. I mean, this is, in all reality, it's just think things through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to reach your capacity significantly faster than you think you're going to. And it's probably going to turn out worse than if you did think it through.
Yeah. And, I think we'll save ourselves a lot of emotional pain if we were to just think things through a lot of times, because not only do we think reactively, our reactivity also has consequences sometimes if we do make the wrong decision. And then we get in this loop where we blame ourselves for the action that we committed, but then we also blame ourselves for thinking that it was right to make that to make that decision.
When it all could have been prevented if it was just thought through.
Yep.
But I mean, sometimes those things can't be thought through. Sometimes you do have to be reactive.
Yeah.
There are times whenever something's going on and you have to have the quickest reaction time you can, which is actually something I have to have in drag racing. And we'll even use that as an example here, because in drag racing, whenever I do my burnout, I come up to the line, I'm staged up, I'm watching the lights fall. I have to know when to let go of the button in my car. I have a button that basically
shoots the car.
Yeah, basically shoots. Well, yeah, makes it go. It makes it take off. So I have to know when I want to let go. So that's reaction number one. That's reaction number one. Is I'm watching those fall. I let go at a certain time, and that's reaction number one. Reactions number 2 through 300 are the rest of the way down the track. Because in the kind of racing I do bracket racing. I have to travel that 8th mile in a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been there, you've watched me do this. I don't want to go too deep into it, because if I do, nobody's going to have an idea of what I'm talking about. So I'm having to watch the person I'm racing. I'm having to look over and see where they are on the racetrack perspectively to where they are to me. So I'm constantly looking over to the other side, looking over, trying to see where they're at. And my reaction on there is if I should stay where the gas is, or if I should take some out, or if I should, let completely out, if I should use the brakes. It's all kinds of stuff. And if the car starts to get squirrely or something, I need to be reactive in knowing to shut off the car, shut off the power, and find somewhere to pull over as safely as possible. Because I have wrecked it before. Obviously I lived, but it wasn't like a super safe landing. I could have died, but I was okay. But that's the thing is and we can use this in that situation. I have to be reactive of everything going on around me.
Yeah, it's very circumstantial.
It is very circumstantial, because there are some instances in just everyone's day-to-day life. Driving, just in driving, you have to be reactive.
Yeah.
Because you don't want somebody to cross the center lane and be like, how should I go about this?
Right,
you don't want to sit there and just think, well, should they come over here and let me, just have me hit them or have them hit me or whatever?
Although, when you're
that's a little bit different than emotional capacity.
Yeah,
it's more of a physical.
But it's
capacity,
this is I'm feeding into it being circumstantial. So if you're fishtailing or you're sliding on ice, don't they say that you shouldn't be reactive and slam down on the brakes?
You should not be on your brakes.
That's hard. That's difficult. Yeah,
that's a very difficult thing to do. That's actually why I wrecked my. I drive a 1968 Camaro. I wrecked it. And the reason why I wrecked it is whenever I hit a slick spot at the end of the track that, for those of you listening, if you hit water or anything that is wet on the end of the racetrack or anywhere on the racetrack, you're probably going to die. And I did. Because if something's slick...
Rest in peace. That's why your music name is The Paralytic.
Oh my God. I've actually been paralyzed in the past 2 years. Anyway,
I'm so sorry.
Yes, he is. I hit a slick spot, and whenever I did, I know how to drive that car. I've been driving for years, but even then, my first reaction was brake. I need to get this car to stop, and I let off completely out of the gas. And whenever it did, it just slammed the car forward, and I immediately just slammed on the brakes, even though I knew better. Because that's the thing is there are professional car drivers, professional race car drivers who, even though they know better than to slam on their brakes, they will instinctually do it. Yes, instinctually do that. The instinctual reaction is to slam on the brakes.
And I think that's a good example
and that's what
of
happened to me.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example of how being reactive can actually be bad.
Yeah, and I do want to say just real quick for anybody listening, and I know we have to go here pretty soon, but if you are instinctual and decide to slam on your brakes, hold on tight, because what that does is it locks the wheels together. So anywhere that you have brakes, it will lock those wheels in place. And if you're already sliding, you're just going to keep sliding. You have no control, no traction. So just be careful whenever you're doing that kind of stuff. But I will let you continue.
I'm going to probably close this out here in a second. But one thing that you said when you first started talking about your drag racing example is you said, I have to know when to let go. And I like that. I like that. I really like that.
I didn't even realize that.
And it's like, dude, in life, you really got to know. It's all about knowing when.
It's yes.
It's all about knowing when. You can fill in the blank. It's about knowing when to let go. It's about knowing when to make a move. It's about knowing when to buy that investment. It's about knowing when to get that job. It's about knowing when to, ask that person out. You can fill the blank. But when you said, I need to know
when to let
when
go.
to let go. I think that's perfect. Like,
because there are a lot of things in life, like we've talked about before, we've both been through stuff like that. We had to know when to let go.
Yeah.
You know, and when to
hold on.
Yeah, and when to hold on too, because I mean, like I said earlier, you got to be ready to hold on.
Yeah, and it's like we were also saying, it's circumstantial. So it's like, you know, you need to know.
In anything, I mean, there are some times like, you know, you'll hit rough patches in relationships and stuff like that. You need to know if you need to let go or to hold on tight. Yeah. Because there are some times you need to hold on, and sometimes, well, it's best to just go ahead and let go. But now there are other times we've talked about, and I'll say this real quick and I'll be done. But with self-actualization and stuff like that, part of that and part of increasing your capacity is not only knowing when to let go, but letting go itself. Because to some extent, you have to let go of who you once were.
And who you thought they were.
And who you thought you were.
Oh, yeah.
You have to let go of who you were and who you are, and try to focus on who you're meant to be. Kind of a thing. Now, it's still difficult to do that, but you need to it's a difficult thing to do, but there are some times when you have to let go of who you once were and be who you are in that moment now. Yeah. Which is, I know that was kind of difficult to explain, a little difficult to follow along with, so I'm so sorry, but anyway.
But yeah, I think that was a nice little sound bite of a podcast episode. I think
it wasn't bad. I mean, we'll continue. I mean,
we'll
maybe
always
not next
reference
week,
capacity.
but we will always reference capacity. We may even talk about it in more depth, but I mean, that's pretty much all the time we really have for right now.
Yeah. But as always, I appreciate everyone that listened this far. Feel free, as always, to follow us on all of our social medias. We're on YouTube at the We're So Sorry Podcast. We're on Instagram at We're So Sorry Podcast. Feel free to follow our personal Instagrams or our artist accounts. I'm on Instagram at DJ Niall Blaine. Austin is on Instagram at The Paralytic.
Yep.
And
go check out our music. We'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, our music is on there. Austin just released a song this past Friday called Anxious. Yep. I'm releasing an EP this week hopefully on February 18th. That'll be coming out. I'll be posting links there.
Which I'm super excited for because this is his first ever EP.
Yeah.
I'm happy. Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to be having a lot of music coming out this year, so I'm really excited.
We both will be having quite a bit. Or at least trying.
Yeah, we're trying. We're really trying this year. But with that, I think we'll see you guys next week. Yep. And as always, I'm Niall.
I'm Austin.
And we're so sorry. Oh, we're going to have to do that again.
No. I'm just so sorry.
Oh, you wanted to.
I was just kidding. No. I just purposely kind of stopped and let you did it just to see what you would say.
Oh, man.
But yes, we are so sorry.
Yes, we are. You're going to have to apologize to me after we stop the recording.
I'm so sorry, Niall.
It's okay. Peace.